Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another live edition of Veteran Nation. Joining me, as always, is our uh, very far
Oh,
up
hey, thanks for
north.
stopping by Veteran Nation. Skipper is doing what every commanding officer should
Nope.
do and
Oh,
remaining utterly silent and letting the enlisted man do all the talking.
stand by.
So, 9th, 2023. Skipper, I don't know if you. I got something for it. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to be on staff at Veteran Nation and part of Red American Media, this here's your perks. This is your perks, folks.
These are
Um,
the
on staff.
corporate.
This 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 is the paycheck for 2 years of doing this show with Skip Burnham. This is the payoff. I waited to unbox that for tonight. I just
You know,
I
we're
was gonna wear it, but I wanted it to be a surprise.
we're getting more and more professional. We're getting there. Sometimes we still run into
Are we
problems
though?
like
Are
microphone not for some reason not connecting. Uh,
wait? Did you just say sometimes we run into a problem with your microphone?
Yeah, and what's funny is I didn't change any in my settings. All I did was I exited out of our little stream platform, went right back in. Everything fine. All my pre-checks were all good. So, no clue. Oh, and yeah, we got some production notes coming at us right now, so we get a little bit distracted at the moment. Uh,
I
but yeah,
IR professional.
we are.
IR.
We just do this stuff on the
That's
fly.
it.
That's okay. We'll
That's
figure
it.
it all
We
out. We got T-shirts though. We all have T-shirts now.
we do, don't we? We all have T-shirts and we never wear them.
And much like when they print off the Super Bowl loser T-shirts, uh, if we do an overprinting, you'll see a lot of homeless people walking around LA with Veteran Nation. So we have a plan if they screw up our orders. Do you- Actually,
This is yeah.
we should do some things to try to drum up some interest in the show. Maybe we should buy some ads. Do you think Dylan Mulvaney is back in the advertising business?
I heard the Navy recruited him.
Yeah, we're competing with the U.S. Navy for trans activists that we can have as part of our marketing team. Uh,
Oh.
but I am glad that we're doing today's show. This is a continuation of what we did last week and what you did on your show yesterday. Um,
Yeah, so yeah, I had if who were here last week or have watched subsequent to last week's show on Tuesday night, um, I and this is obviously we have a limited amount of time. This is a network. We can't just like ramble on. Well, okay, we ramble on, but we have a limited amount of time to ramble on. And so on my platform, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, both on Rumble and on YouTube, I can ramble on with my guest as long as I'd like. And as great as it was to have Heather on to talk about Caleb last week, we just did not have time to do justice to the entirety of the story.
yeah.
Um, and and we found out last night that we just didn't have time to do justice to the entirety of the story in 2 hours.
Hmm.
And we're Heather and I are in communication still today. We're going to be working on doing another show next week on TC and Friends Monday Night Musings over on Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, and we're going to have Heather back, and hopefully we'll be able to bring her attorney on there as well as we're going to be doing tonight. So, Skipper, you set all of this up for tonight.
Hmm.
I have yet to meet this esteemed counselor. Um, and I promise I will refrain from making derogatory lawyer jokes unless I find out, um, unless I find out that not only is he an attorney, but he was also a Marine, or in the Air Force, then I can't. I'm not going to be able to help myself. So
You know, all sins are forgivable. You know. Well, and hopefully tonight's show, you know, we can get through everything before we run up against Juan's bedtime because you know he does have to rest sometimes.
you know, you should not pick on Juan. Juan works his butt off at a real
Oh,
job all day,
he does,
and then he comes in here and has to put up with you.
and he has to deal with my texts all day too because we're
Yeah,
day of the
no,
show we're always texting back and forth.
I don't know what this we is. I was gonna second Juan's motion today when he texted us that, you know, if you guys don't have a guest, and then I remembered that you told us we had a guest, and I'm like, poor Juan. So I don't think Juan's working from home this week though.
No, I think he's on the road. I think he's out scouting new talent to take our time slot.
So he's at a mortuary.
So if you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook, put your resume down in the chat and we'll make sure Juan gets it.
Or just, you know, a picture of yourself not looking like either Skipper or I. That would
All
probably
complaints can be sent to veterannation@protonmail.com. I hope we do get some viewer feedback. I would
Oh,
love to read it on live.
oh, that would be so much better than your elevator pitches for TV shows. So, you have Heather's attorney, Daniel. Is it
Daniel.
Dan or Daniel? I don't know. Daniel. You have her attorney coming on tonight. So do you want to, you know, bring him in and
Yeah,
introduce
let's
him?
go ahead. Let's bring him
That's
in.
So I tried.
Hey, welcome to the show.
Hey, good afternoon, guys.
He says good afternoon. Oh, he's one of those. He's a West Coaster. Thanks for coming
I'm
on.
down in Tampa. Yeah, no, thanks for having me.
Good afternoon in Tampa.
It's afternoon. I heard LA. I figured you guys are on West Coast. One of you at least, maybe.
I'm West Coast, yeah.
Skipper. Yeah.
Not
he's
by
not on the
choice at the
coast,
moment.
by the way. He's up in the mountains somewhere.
There you go.
In the desert.
I'm like Art Bell. Yeah, I'm broadcasting from an undisclosed location in the desert. And then we have Heather. Welcome back to the show, Heather.
Oh. Hi. How are you guys?
She's so perky. It's
I'm a school teacher. What can I say?
I let her know before the show that there were no pitches, so she's that's probably why she's perky.
She's probably elated after last week's. You know what she said? She texted me last night after the show on my channel. She said it was so nice not having any pitches. I'm like, I know. That's why I do.
Did I say that?
Shh, Heather, you're supposed to go along with me on that one.
All right, guys.
So, Skipper, you have been in communication now with Heather and with Daniel, and so tell us a little bit about what you wanted to talk about tonight.
Sure, because you know, previously when we had Heather on, we talked about Caleb's story and you know a lot of the things that she went through, and what I would like to focus on now, because I don't think many people out there really understand when you are doing a lawsuit and they're doing a lawsuit against the federal government, the type of uphill battle and challenges that you face because the government doesn't like anyone telling it that it's wrong. So maybe we can just start generically talking about the case. Daniel, if you would, kind of give us a summary as how you guys see it.
So, like you said, there's a lot of issues here with any time you're going and suing the government now, and particularly when you add the military aspect to that. And so big picture, this actually goes back to a 1950 Supreme Court case, Ferris versus the United States. And in that case, that was a wrongful death suit that was brought by the spouse of Lieutenant Colonel Rudolph Ferris, who died in a barracks fire that was started due to faulty wiring that was known to the command, was not updated. Him and 3 other soldiers died in that fire. I believe all of the cases were filed against the government. So at the time, I think in 1950s thereabouts, I don't know the exact date off the top of my head, but the Federal Tort Claims Act was enacted by Congress. That's the law. Basically, to sue the government needs to give you permission. So the Federal Tort Claims Act is the federal government's way of doing that, that says for certain personal injuries or property damage, you can sue us for negligence under this statute. That was passed. Within that statute, there are codified exceptions. Part of the exceptions involves military members, and for any cases in active war or battle, essentially. And, I think that makes sense to everyone. You can't be expected to sue for what's going on in a combat scenario or a wartime scenario for the military. What wasn't codified was general negligence, like what happened to Rudolph Ferris in that barracks fire. The case went the whole way up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decided that they termed incident to service. Anything incident to service is barred under the FTCA. Incident to service is the term that then, following that Supreme Court decision, has been elaborated on in various other court opinions, up to the Supreme Court, back down, various circuits, to include basically anything related to military service, is what this umbrella term has now captured. Military members, basically, despite the most egregious context of negligence, could have been, I'm operating on your left leg, I cut off the right, you're shit out of luck, sorry, Like, that's the reality that so many service members face. And it's one of those things that I think everyone that signs up in that area understands, again, they're putting their life on the line for the country, for, everything that they're fighting for. But the reverse side of that is they don't realize that in the context of non-combat scenarios that could happen while you're on active duty, like, for instance, medical negligence, like other negligence, like dying in a barracks fire for known electrical issues, things like that, general negligence issues. There's a clear distinction, I feel, for most of those issues. And, the Federal Tort Claims Act did allow it up until that Ferris case. That definition of incident to service that the courts created has been used by the Department of Defense to bar any lawsuits against them for any negligence. Again, the most clear-cut, you can't attack it, gets filed in federal court, gets dismissed under this Ferris doctrine, as it's been come to know. Take us to 2020. There's been efforts to change that throughout the years. Again, even up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court itself this is one of those rare occurrences where you had Scalia and Ginsburg on a same opinion, saying something doesn't make sense here. And when things like that line up, there's a problem. But basically, the Supreme Court had said in their dicta, so not the majority opinion because they follow precedents. So Ferris doctrine is the law of the land. Basically, what the Supreme Court says is it's up to Congress to fix this. We can't legislate, even though they did in 1950, but they can't legislate to change it, even though it doesn't make sense on the plain language of the law, what the statute says in the FTCA. But again, we have the Supreme Court case, so that's where we're at. In 2020, the law was changed slightly to permit the DoD to at least acknowledge for medical malpractice claims. They have to acknowledge the claim, and whereas they previously you'd get a denial letter saying, sorry, Ferris doctrine, we can't really do anything. Now they have to consider the claim if it's in the context of medical negligence.
Okay.
They still have drastic limits on this, but it at least opened the door, so to say, for the claims process to go forward. And as part of that, the DOD, this is where the bill that Congress passed that allowed the medical malpractice claims for military members gave the DOD the authority to regulate the process, and basically giving the keys, for the fox in the hen house. You're saying you guys design how it's set up, right? So to say. So they had a year to put out the regulations. They put out an interim regulation. The regulation they put out had some issues, so to say. One of them being so the original statute that Congress passed did not place a monetary cap on damages in the context of these claims. But what it did do was said that there's a threshold limit. So anything under 100,000 can be paid by the JAG office processing it. Anything above 100 needs to get SecDef approval. Aside from that, I believe they had 400 million allotted for the first 10 years of claims on that. Don't quote me on that, but that's what I believe was in the considerations. And then the regulation placed a 600, and originally it was 500,000, a $500,000 cap on pain and suffering damages for any medical malpractice claims. And then the DOD also created a section of the regulations that stated they would offset any malpractice award by various other benefits that a service member or their family may be entitled to. So in the context of death cases, your death gratuity, that gets deducted. Any veterans benefits for the death that you may be entitled to would get deducted. In the event that you survive the malpractice, your DOD disability pay that you may be entitled to would be offset from the award amount, as well as any benefits on the VA side that you may qualify for. And that's, again, none of this was discussed in the statute language. The statute language that Congress passed is very clear but they also did say that we give the DOD authority to make the regulations for how they want to implement this.
That's quite interesting.
The regulations, the DOD...
They're essentially giving the DOD power over the Department of the Veterans Affairs, from what you're explaining there.
Here.
Okay, sorry. That's pretty
I just
interesting.
Missed that, Skipper. Yeah.
Yeah, what you're explaining there, it sounds like they gave the DOD some power over the Department of Veterans Affairs, which seems incredibly interesting.
Well, and this is where, again, the statute that was passed does not reference that the DOD has authority to utilize the VA benefit system in any way. That's something the DOD regulations themselves, the DOD put in the regulations themselves. So, which was, again, that right off the bat stands out as far-reaching. It makes sense that the DOD wants to offset pay the DOD is paying, right? Disability pay on the active duty side, things like that. Okay, not ideal, but whatever. To go farther and say we're going to also deduct any VA benefit pay that you're going to be entitled to over the course of your lifetime is the thing. So for a young man or woman who gets discharged with severe disability because of a malpractice claim, where they may receive 100% service connection in their 20s, they're projected to live over 70. I think the DOD projects anywhere between 1 to over 3 million in just VA benefits that they're going to offset. So you're starting in the hole at minus 3 million in some of these cases, and you're capping the damages for the pain and suffering. Doesn't take a mathematician to look at those figures and say, there's something not going to add up here.
Mm-hmm.
And when you
what I hear
add
you
in that, yeah, go ahead.
What I hear you saying is that, like, as per usual, the DOD is finding every way in the world to screw anybody that's been in the military and gets out for whatever reason. That's what I hear you saying. I know as a lawyer you're probably not allowed to say it that way, but I'm not. I'm an enlisted guy, so I'll tell you. That's what's happening.
It looks like that.
So basically, they're saying, "Oh, great. Oh, they've decided that in this precedence that's been set in this Ferris case. Here's what you have to do, and the DOD's like, oh yeah, no problem, we'll do that. We're still going to take it all from you.
It looks like a lot of lip service, to say the least. That's for sure.
That is one way of saying it. That's why you go into the courtrooms and I don't.
And it even gets, a little bit worse. So they also say that in the context of your malpractice claim, because you're entitled to VA healthcare, or in the event that you're discharged with TRICARE, you get insurance. So a majority of your medical damages that are normally for malpractice cases where an individual survives, that's where there's a lot of future medical issues, things of that nature for those catastrophic injuries. They also say that we're not going to consider any medical benefits that you're entitled to under the other systems. Which, again, as you all may know, those systems, yes, they do provide healthcare, but to the extent that someone who's catastrophically injured needs the level of care and the quickness to get that care, that's a big disconnect with the idea that they're going to be getting that care with those systems fully in those instances. So it's another just slap in the face with what they put in the regulation.
Does this apply to military family members as well? If let's say there was another Camp Lejeune water case on a base where families are being poisoned, would this apply to them as well?
So the family of the active duty, they will always have, Ferris won't apply to them.
Okay.
But in the event that they lose their loved one, so the spouse, right, a military wife, their husband dies due to negligence. The way the law is set up right now, or in the regulations, the spouse won't have a claim for her husband's consortium, so to say, is normally what that term is legally, that the spouse claims for when the family member dies like that. There won't be a claim for her. It's going to be for the individual that died. The service member is the only one that actually has the claim. Now, the damages in the context of what the family's lost out, that would be up to how you try to present that claim. But the spouse, even under the current lay of the law, doesn't have their own claim on that death, so to say. But if they're hurt, injured negligently, a spouse or child on base would have the incident to service Ferris issue would not be applicable to them, so to say.
This is very interesting, very eye-opening.
Yeah.
So what's this look like for? What does this look like? So, well, first of all, Heather, what made you decide to reach out to Daniel, and how did you get connected? Because this guy sounds like he knows what he's talking about, and you've been talking to Skipper for the last few
I'm really
weeks.
glad that you asked that right now in this spot, because I'd like to talk about my friend Kamni Del Barba. And Kamni, her son
That was
Des
not set
Del
up, by
Barba
the way.
is
No idea.
one that I'm thinking of when talking about what Daniel was just talking about. And if I could be so bold, she's the one that encouraged me to reach out to Daniel. And she'd heard about Caleb's case, because immediately I'm gasping for air on my own Facebook profile, writing these little, my own little news pieces, news to the world, what's going on with Caleb. And people start, pouring in. And I don't know how she found me, but she did. And she encouraged me to reach out to Daniel. And she's been really encouraging to me. So, for the last 3 years, she's by my side, walking with me down this path and just kind of lighting the way. She's a warrior. And so, I think she definitely hooked me up with the best. Daniel is incredible. And he's been here on the spot, on the double. He even was there for Caleb's final review, where the command flew out to Lubbock, met with myself at my Congressman Jody Arrington's office, and Daniel flew out and met with all of us there, and our journey began. And here it goes. It just continues on, and we're just Batman and Robin. You know, here we go. It's been boots on the ground. So
Um, so you reached out, and Daniel, as you're getting to know Heather and talking to her, was there? I mean, anybody can hear the case of what happened to Caleb and be outraged. It, if you hear what happened to Caleb and you're not outraged, I question your humanity. But what did you hear when you were talking to Heather? What was she saying that made you, take note and say, on this case? And what kind of attorney are you? But that probably sounded very hostile. I didn't mean it. That was not meant to be hostile, counselor. But I mean, what kind of law do you practice, and how did you because this is kind of a niche area. This is not this. It's just like, oh hey, I think I'm going to go to law school and we're all going to learn how to sue the army.
Sure. No, and definitely. So thanks, Heather, for all the kind words there and everything. But yeah, law-wise, my firm, we practice federal employment, veterans benefits, and military issues, specifically with the malpractice issues, but also other military, discharge upgrades, things like that, medical discharge, help on that side. But this was an area where, prior to doing my own firm, I was working at a firm that did this area of law in terms of those three areas. And with that, in my prior experience, I did have an opportunity to work with being intimately involved with getting this law passed for the Stay School Act, is what it was coined. That was Richard, at the time, Richard Stay School was, I think he's now a master sergeant, but first class, or sergeant first class Stay School. He was a former client, and the name of the law was named after him and his advocacy that he did with the firm there. So I got to see, the initiation of the law taking its effect, and also then, like Heather mentioned, there's a small community of folks, this tragedy that unfortunately happens to individuals, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, daughters, sons, all of them. It's a small community, but when it happens, it wrecks you. And to see, someone like Heather, she was so strong following what happened to Smitty, and to be able to find to that next step of, I want some form of accountability in these cases. That accountability has been a driving force, I guess, in all of this, and a passion that I have with Legally Speaking, being able to advocate for those like these individuals and for the families like Heather. It's a really good opportunity to do what, legally speaking, what you think about, you dream, these legal efforts that you're never going to really be a part of in law school, but ultimately being able to change something this severe and to be a part of that is something I've always had a passion for. And connecting with the families like Heather, but specifically when Heather called with Caleb's case, again, this is knowing how difficult it is to get answers when your loved one dies in the military, in those months that follow, in the years that follow, in some cases. Hearing the issues that she was experiencing, getting Caleb's body back, as simple as things back, there's a lot that, having an outside counsel, so to say, to put added pressure on the department to do what they're supposed to be doing can be helpful. And just navigating this process, getting the investigative files that you're being told are being done, the answers that you have been waiting for. You're left in a black box when your loved one dies under any type of suspicious circumstances, whether it be medical or other.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not as though they give you a how-to guide on who you need to call, what you can do, how do you get the answers when they're telling you sorry. things like that. And just being able to provide, I don't even think with Heather's case, we were talking medical right off the bat, or, a claim, so to say. It was, let's help Heather get answers about what happened to Smitty, because what happened to Smitty stinks in terms of something happened here. This is prong, and there needs to be some answers. The fact that she knows what
Literally.
she knows already at this stage, it didn't make sense. What is going on behind the closed doors here? What is going on at Fort Bragg? We need, again, this is one of those, you can't make this shouldn't have happened. And to hear what happened was just such a disservice to the whole uniform services and what they stand for. And to know that somebody like you didn't have to talk to Heather long to know who Smitty was in terms of the type of kid that he is. And again, meeting with her, you could see behind her everything about him. His photos captures his essence, and he's the type of kid you want in the military. He is. I joked to her, I was like, he's like the Captain America after he gets the injection kind of guy. He's that driven guy. So knowing that and seeing how wrong it was what happened to him, we needed answers, and I was there to help, is what I told Heather. And that, like she said, we've been going up this mountain, but we're moving for sure. So,
And that's I have a deep appreciation for that.
Definitely.
And I definitely want to thank Heather, because she's been helping us to get in contact with other families so that we can do more of these stories, so that we can do some good and hopefully affect some of these changes. So I would absolutely encourage you that as you pick up more cases like this, absolutely
Yes.
bring them to us, because one thing that me and TC on this show, we are dedicated to fighting corruption, because we both have been in government jobs. We both have seen it up close and personal, and we don't like it.
definitely, I think I could definitely connect you with some folks. So I appreciate you guys giving a platform for this, because, again, like you said, the more this requires, the people don't know about these issues, even though it's something that everyone should know about, because our servicemen and women, they give so much, but then at the same time, they have very reduced rights when it comes to certain things. And, putting it in context, even prisoners, not to say they don't have rights, but even prisoners have more rights when it comes to negligence than our service members do under the current law.
Wow.
And that doesn't make sense, because, again, I think there's a clear distinction with the types of scenarios where a service member would never expect to be suing the government for. But there's also the situations like what happened to Caleb that are completely outrageously, just not what should be happening. And there should be some form of accountability more than just somebody getting a desk change. That's all. What does that do to change, to make sure this doesn't happen again? And unfortunately, one thing that does is making somebody pay through a lawsuit. If you can't force them to do something, that's what the courts do, have that benefit. And I can assure you that 70 years of bad DOD negligence, whether it be from poor decision making or whatever, would have been filtered out if there was the ability and access to the courts to address these issues, versus them being able to hide behind the shield that is the Ferris Doctrine. It's as simple as that.
Right now, what is the status of this case?
So Caleb's claim, this is another just slap in the face from this whole process. So we've been waiting with Caleb's claim in the JAG office processing. We provided medical opinions that say, established the negligence. The DOD came back beginning of last month, the Army, and said, we've reviewed, and in Caleb's case, there was a contractor involved on one day of the treatment. And because there's a contractor, we actually don't have to pay, or he's not covered under the law. So because a contractor's involved, and they only reviewed 2 days of care, January 14th and January 15th. January 14th, they say everything was met, no issues with the standard of care. January 15th, they don't get into the details. They just say contractor, clean hands, so to say.
What's hilarious about this is a DOD signed contract. They're saying that, oh, we don't have any responsibility, but they're the ones who signed the contract.
Right. It's not as though this guy popped out of nowhere, and it's again. But what's even more a slap? What's even worse in the disingenuousness with the whole process is assuming this is the contractor and he was responsible. We may have had an individual action we could bring against him individually as a contractor, assuming he carries some type of malpractice insurance. However, the Army waited until past the statute of limitations for any negligence in North Carolina to let us know of the fact that there was a contractor involved. And this is information that we've requested information through FOIA to try to get if there was any contractor information, anything like that. We've also had a debriefing from the Fort Bragg command, including command from Womack. At no point was it mentioned that there's a contractor involved. We've had multiple correspondence from Heather's congressional rep to the Army. We've had multiple the JAG office. It's not as though they can't email the guy and me email, you know what I'm saying? This isn't like we don't have a telegram, and even that they could have gotten it to me. I would have found out, but whatever. So, but they waited, and then they tell us we're not responsible. The person that is a contractor, and then you're out of luck. They didn't tell us that part, but that's what we had to go look at and see and say whether or not that's the case. But aside from that, they also ignore the other issues in Caleb's case. So that's the initial determination in the process. We have an opportunity to rebut this. That's where we're at right now. We're getting the medical rebuttal opinion to basically say your whole perception of all of this is wrong, because it is, and we have the evidence to support that. But the fact that we have to go through this at this stage, it fuels the whole issue with why the DOD is governing their whole process, setting it up for the DOD to win. They win every time. That's what they're showing, And what's even a bigger issue. I keep saying there's a bigger issue because there is every one of them, but even Richard Stasel's claim was denied by Fort Bragg months ago as well.
The namesake of the Stiskel Act, yeah.
The namesake, they said his issue was a lung cancer misdiagnosis, a failure to diagnose. It was noted early on. They didn't tell him right away. They told him later, and it resulted in stage 4 lung cancer. They're saying because you're still alive, I presume, that it didn't, they said, didn't really harm you, is what I presume. So they didn't give him any claim. And again, it's not as though the DOD doesn't have the money in this scenario. The money's allotted from Congress. This is one of these situations where it's not annually. It doesn't need to be renewed for these 10 years, is my understanding. Mm-hmm. This is set aside. But for whatever reason, they've created the scenarios to play out in a way where they minimize the amount the DOD is on the hook for in every way. So it's just completely unjust and just a slap in the face to our service members and their families.
And the Army just found an out for accountability, is all it is.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you think...
I'm saying that because a contractor treated him, they don't have to be responsible.
You're going to be shocked when we tell you that we cannot believe that the DOD, the Department of the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, or Space Force, we cannot believe that at any point they would ever ever not do the right thing by people. And so I'm going to ask this. Daniel, you're clearly dealing with far more than just Heather's situation as it regards Caleb, but you're dealing with this, Staskell case. I would imagine there's probably others within the firm. If you're
Well,
not dealing
and
with
just for
more
clear,
of
I
it.
don't represent Stay School currently, just for the record. That was just,
No.
he's still with the previous firm, but that was announced. There was a big release
Okay.
on that where there was a thing on the
But
Hill
you're
where
dealing with other clients in much the same way, maybe not as severe as a situation that Heather finds herself in. But I'm guessing that this is a pattern of behavior that you are seeing frequently. It's just in this situation, everything surrounding the death of Caleb is grotesque and egregious, and I've gotten to know Heather. I'm betting that it's not the goal here is not the money, it's the accountability in getting answers. And the only way to do that, if I'm understanding what you're saying, to get any of these answers is really kind of drag them into the fire of a courtroom,
Right.
or in front of a judge, or somebody who says, "Hold up, this is BS. we have discovery that needs to be done."
Let's be honest. This is, if they're going to treat Caleb's case this way, this is how they're going to treat all of the cases.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. How are they going to treat somebody that's merely been injured and not taken care of, let alone,
this
die?
is a picture of what's going to happen if you let your kids enlist, or could. Okay, I mentioned the statistics before, but 75% of our service members die non-combat deaths. And of that 75%, 93% die on U.S. soil. That's recent congressional research.
Now, do you...
Alert! Wake up! Let's...
Do you believe the
this
solution...
is crazy. I can't believe it.
Do you believe the solution to this is going to be new legislation, case law, or a combination of both?
So it's going to have to be both. I would, primarily Congress has to act here. It's been signaled from the Supreme Court that they aren't going to take another Ferris case, basically, is what the Supreme Court keeps hinting. Because we've had in the last 5 years, 6 years, a few cases go up to the Supreme Court for a petition. They have not accepted a Ferris case. In the last denial of it, I believe Justice Thomas says, he cites back to the Scalia decision that where Ginsburg and him were on the same page, where he says, we've said it before, Congress needs to fix this. It's as simple as that.
Okay.
I don't think the current Supreme Court's going to take a Ferris case again because of that reason. If they did, I think there's a good chance that Ferris gets changed at the court level. But we'll have to see if the court takes a case. Meanwhile, Congress definitely.
To be fair to SCOTUS, and I'm not downplaying the situation at all, but to be fair to SCOTUS, if you take Marbury versus Madison out of the equation, that comment from SCOTUS really is the right answer. That's ultimately the right answer, because Marbury versus Madison was a broad overreach on the part of SCOTUS 200 years ago, and what Thomas is saying is not that he doesn't give a damn. He's saying there's only one way to fix this, because if the courts keep ruling on this, then every single case is going to go to the courts every time, and family members, especially the Heathers of the world, the Patricias for Private Halliday, of the world, that not everybody's going to have the internal fortitude and the cojones, metaphorically, Heather, to take on the fight. Some people are going to say, I don't have the money. Some people are going to say, I don't have the time. I have a life I have to live. And Heather has a life she has to live, but part of that is now getting justice for Caleb. And so if every single time one of these cases goes in front of a district court, and then to a circuit court, and then to an appeals court, and then and on and on in the circuit court and on and on and on and on and on. These poor people are just going to
Yeah.
quit. And that's what the DOD, that's what the Army is counting on, is that they have the time, they have the money, they have the resources. They'll spend $10 million fighting each one of these cases over $500,000 to make a point that they don't have to pay it. And
And
that's
you're
what they're
exactly
counting on.
right.
Yeah, and they're not
That's why
emotionally
Thomas is saying this has got to get fixed in Congress. This has got to get fixed through the House
Yeah.
and the Senate. Now, here's a
Yeah.
question for and I know what Heather's answer is. Heather wants everybody in the United States to show up in Washington D.C. with a sign and a pitchfork, but
what?
a sign and a pitchfork.
Lincoln Monument.
The universal sign of the peasants and the proletariat rising up.
I just want to talk to everybody.
But
and say hi.
But what can we do? What angle of, excuse the terminology, this is a veteran show. What angle of attack can we take to get more people involved in this? Because, Skipper and I have talked about the organization Defend the Guard. I'm very much involved in trying to promote Defend the Guard. That's a grassroots movement to take legislation at the state level to force the federal level to do certain things when it comes to deploying troops, so that they can't constantly be deploying the National Guard to be sending active duty troops back and forth all the time. So is there something that can be done at a local grassroots level besides telling these stories? Because I'm not going away. Skipper's not going away. Juan and Right America Media and New Right Network, we're not going away on this. But what can we do from the perspective of a mom who's suffering, and from you, Daniel, as an attorney, to get this in front of the right? Who do we need to talk to? Do we need to appeal to the left? Maybe the left. I mean, do we appeal to the left's anti-military, alleged anti-military, screw the military over as much as they can? Because I mean, if we have to, like, I'll partner up with somebody on the left to do this.
I'll go to San Francisco.
That's a different reason and a different time of year, Skipper.
This is a bipartisan issue. Everybody needs to be on board, and everybody
right now it's a
has to be on
no-partisan
board
issue
for
because
anything
nobody's
to
paying
move forward.
It's a nonpartisan issue because nobody's paying a damn bit of attention to this.
Well,
I guarantee you,
Right.
there's nobody in the House or the Senate that's paying attention to this crap.
So I don't know if you're a mind reader, TC. You're out here pulling facts out like you're working over with us or something. But the big issue is the education on this. Is one, you're right. Congress thinks they fixed the Ferris issue with the Stay-Sco Act. That in their head, they think that was a bill they signed, they passed, it's all good. That was done. I've met with even up to the Army Secretary and the undersecretaries of the DOD most recently about the issues with the regulations and how they create a scenario that can play out that's completely unjust, completely inequitable, and completely against the original intent of what this law was passed to do, which was to provide additional compensation for these service members and families for the malpractice, aside from what exists. And the shockness of all of the representatives in the Armed Services Committee on both the House and Senate sides, the other representatives on just the Hill that we've met with for various clients of mine, and on behalf of Caleb and Heather that we've reached out to. People don't know the reality of what the law looks like, because it's the sad reality that Congress isn't sitting there looking at the laws and the effects of those laws that they're passing and how, if they're actually meeting what they were supposed to do, right? Until someone brings it to their attention, until enough people bring it to their attention, enough service members, enough Gold Star families, enough brothers of us, and sisters say, what you allowed the Department of Defense to do in my son, my brother, my daughter, my dad, my mom, their case is a slap in the face to us. And we need you to change it and look at this. because you're not wrong that a lot of folks on the Hill think this was fixed, don't even understand there's an issue. When they hear it, I don't know what we can do, but there is a solution. And there's one of the things that I know there's some other service organizations, veteran service organizations are working towards pushing is potentially defining incident to service. If Congress legislated what incident to service means in the FTCA, that would potentially create the scenario where the DoD can't hide behind that shield of incident to service in the courtroom. And by defining it in a way that already, with the law as it already is written in the Federal Tort Claims Act, we have an exception in the already codified Federal Tort Claims Act that says that there is no, basically that there is no claim, an exception for any claims under any claims arising out of combatant activities of the military, naval forces, or Coast Guard during a time of war, combat, or other deployment. And you can expand that a little bit further, say to not include, training, whatever they want Congress believes, but at least put parameters on what incident to service isn't. Because is being left in your barracks room for 6 days to die alone, is that incident to your service? Is that what signing, is that related to your service? I don't think it was for Caleb. Is you not getting treated at the ER, for the negligence or for the issues that you're presenting, is that necessarily incident to service in the context of what should and shouldn't be allowed? And again, the other thing with this, the DoD, the arguments against changing the law have always been the floodgates are going to open. We can't withstand the lawsuits that are going to come. And all I can say is with the passage of the Staceco Act, there was no floodgates of claims that open. I think it's something under 1,000 claims in total have been filed across the branches over the last 3 years since the enactment of the law. And of those claims, they've denied 90% of them that they've decided on, or however many, and even in the context of suing the federal government, you don't win. Plaintiffs don't win against the federal government all the time. It's a hard battle. It's not an easy battle. Not every case if you got the right to sue, doesn't mean you're going to win. So the idea that the DoD still wouldn't have an argument in court in 7 out of 10 of these cases, that would be filed is out of here. But the 3 that they actually have to be accountable for, I can assure you there will be real changes being made in the DoD if we have that right to court.
So I do have a question, because I'm a bit of a judicial nerd, and I do follow a lot of cases because I'm just a dork like that.
You could have just said nerd.
Yeah, well, yeah, that too. But there's a case out of Louisiana. I believe that's the Sixth Circuit Court. Don't quote me on that. I could be very wrong. But it's a challenge to what's known as the Chevron rule, which was where Chevron and the EPA, there was a law passed, and the Supreme Court essentially said back in 1987, well, when there's a gray area on these type of regulations, the administration, or so in that case it was the EPA, it's now being challenged to the ATF's powers. They said that they get to, wherever the gray area is, the government gets to decide. And with this current case, the Sixth Circuit has said no, this is that gray area, that's false. And apparently it has gotten cert to the Supreme Court. And based upon what you're saying about this case, it sounds like this is kind of along those same lines. Do you think, I don't know if you're familiar with the case, but if you are, do you think that could have some impact on this?
So I don't know the specific case that was decided, but I'm definitely going to look into that now. If going off what you're saying, if the Chevron rule is in play for being basically the deference for the agencies, that's what Chevron says is that gray area gets decided by the government. If that gets overturned, so to say, that may also open an avenue of attacking the regulation, so to say, in this law, because that, to my understanding, the regulation in this law hasn't been challenged yet. But that is definitely something that, I've been spinning in my head if it's possible. But the way that the law was passed in the State School Act gave broad authority to the DoD in the context of almost as unambiguous as Congress can get with "you guys got the keys to the car, go do what you want" type deal. So whether challenging what the DoD created versus what Congress intended when they put that provision that said they can create it, that's going to be the discrepancy, right? But I still think if that Sixth Circuit case gets decided in favor of overturning the Chevron deference, I think that creates a unique scenario for interpreting the regulatory process here.
That case is specifically about bump stocks, and the Sixth Circuit Court deemed that bump stocks, the ATF was saying bump stocks because of what they do, we're going to define them as a machine gun, and the Sixth Circuit said no, this is a part. While it may give it machine gun functions, it does not essentially equate to a machine gun. A bump stock by itself is not a machine gun, so the whole rule is wrong. So it is going to the Supreme Court, but I don't think it's going to be in. I think it's the next session. So heard somewhere in October, most likely.
Well, that's going to be
Heather,
something to track for sure.
Heather, you had said at one time that there is a petition out there. Is that on the website?
It is on the website. If you go to Caleb Smither, CalebSmither.com, you can find at the very top of the page, you can see the petition that you can sign on petition2gov.org, I believe. And then additionally, there's a form letter that we have for the public if they would like to please help by sending your own letter to your own representative. I think it's important for all of our representatives to know about what is occurring. Like I mentioned before, it's not just happening to Caleb, it's happening to so many of our service members. And it's going to continue to happen if we don't shed light on it and alert our representatives. And people just don't know. It's education. But also, signing the petition would help, and that, sending that letter to your representative or my representative, my senators, my Congressman Jody Arrington, Senator Cruz, Senator Cornyn. We need to be sending these letters to any and all of the Senate and House Armed Service Committee members, if I may be so bold.
Well, no, that's...
Send it to
since we have you two experts here...
United States.
Oh, well, no, he probably couldn't even...
Send it to whoever.
Since we have you two experts here, let's go over this. Let's go over this one more time. Who are the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, DoD, Veterans Affairs Committee? Let's go over those names real quick. And it's 801. No, it's 901 for those of you that are over there on the left coast. And the other left coast, it's 601.
Well, I can tell you.
Go over those names real quick, so that
Congressman Mike Best, I've interviewed on this channel before, and he is on the House Armed Services Committee, so he is very receptive. I think I still have access to some of his people, so if I can, I'll put that in the description on the YouTube link.
Yeah,
well, let's get these chairmen's names out there.
You got Chairman Mike Rogers on the House Armed Services side, Chairman Jack Reed on the Senate side, Ranking Member Roger Wicker on the Senate side, Ranking Member Adam Smith on the House side. And then within the subcommittee on military personnel is where an issue like this should be targeted. Jim Banks, Representative Jim Banks, is the chair of the House Armed Services Committee. Representative Andy Kim's the Dem side. For the Senate, let me think. Let me pull it up. 'cause I don't
Wicker.
know off the top of my head. Is it Wicker?
Isn't it
Wicker's the
Wicker?
ranking member. And who's the chair of that? And then you have, I guess Elizabeth
Jackie?
Warren's the, yeah. Elizabeth Warren and Rick Scott is the ranking of the subcommittee on the Senate side. And then you have Secretary of Defense Austin, Secretary of Army Christine Warmuth. Who else do we got that you should be writing for? Honestly, Lindsey Graham in the
FNC.
judiciary, he could probably be convinced that Ferris needs changed. He's one of the biggest proponents of Ferris doctrine for whatever reasons. And unfortunately, any law that comes out from addressing the Ferris has to, after it gets through the Armed Services Committee, it's got to go through judiciary. And I know that in the first go around, Lindsey Graham was a very big proponent of not changing things and keeping it at the status quo. So that if he could see that, again, I think
We actually have
the
some
reasoning
friends of
that
the
had
show
been
who are
used-
meeting
yeah,
with
go
him
ahead.
later on this week, so I'll try to get some contact information for people within his office.
That would be great.
I would also say Sharon M. Silas. She is at the GAO office. It's silass@gao.gov. That's where you can email her.
Also, the Undersecretary of Defense, Dr. Kathleen Hicks. There has been discussions that the DoD is considering reopening the regulatory rule in the context of the offsets that they have and the cap potentially as it applies to the pain and suffering damages. And the DoD could use some added pressure to urge them to do right if they're doing this a second time. Again, I'm not going to hold my breath on that, seeing how they did it the first time, but if they're going to be reopening, at least, again, to add pressure and to urge them to do what they should be doing and actually help our service members if they're going to change the rule and not create a scenario that doesn't help anybody. So.
Absolutely. Now, if there's any other families who have dealt with a similar situation, they're looking, to start their own case, Daniel, how can they find your practice?
Sure. So you can Google me, Daniel Maharaj. It's a little bit tongue twister. Or you can go to smkfirm.com is our firm's website. You can email me directly, daniel@smkfirm.com, or reach me on my direct line, 813-565-1201. And more than happy to help anyone, even just point you in the right direction. I know, again, navigating this process when you're dealing with the grief of losing the loved one itself it takes tremendous strength. And no, you're not alone. Even if it's not with us talking, there's other groups, again, these Facebook groups, there's support for people that have unfortunately had to go through something similar, and I would advise people to look into those for sure. So.
And Heather, if you want to go ahead, I know we plugged you last week, but tell people where they can reach out to you and support you.
Oh my goodness. Well, if you just go to calebsmither.com, you can see all of my social media platforms. And I'm on Facebook as Heather Hedge Baker. I'm on Instagram as Hedge76. TikTok, same basically. You just look up Caleb Smither and you can find me pretty much anywhere. So, and I'm any families that need support, just reach out to me. Just message me. I'm all ears. I'm always here to help guide with what knowledge I have. I'm still learning. If I don't know, I'll reach out to somebody that does. It's important for us to be that link in the chain. that was broken. Caleb was the ultimate left behind.
Absolutely.
Which is incredibly tragic, considering that the unit that the division that he was assigned to prides itself on never leaving a man behind.
Right. Yeah.
And
I mean, if you think about the NCO created, competence is my watchword. My two basic responsibilities will always be uttermost in my mind, accomplishment of my mission and welfare of my soldiers. And then, and the the paratroopers creed, it kind of utters it a different way, but it says, I will never fail my fellow comrades by shirking any duty or training and fight as a team. Right?
absolutely.
Who was there for Smitty? And I mean, from the very beginning and all the way through, he's been left behind, and here they are trying to do it again. It's tragic. These are egregious cases, not just Caleb's, but many, many others. And we just need all of our friends to please, 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 the fabric of America, we the people, we need you now. And we need you guys to be educated about what's happening in our military to so many of our service members. It's my fight it's for Caleb. I can't bring Caleb back, but maybe we can save somebody else. That's my main mission, is just to make sure that our service members are safe on their own territory. That they don't have to die behind enemy lines on a base that they swear to defend.
And I'll just remind all of our viewers,
I don't think there's...
This show is a nonprofit, and we will continue supporting Heather as she continues this fight. And you can also go to veterannationfoundation.com, and you can support our nonprofit, where we will be supporting Heather and other Gold Star families as they work to fight to get more transparency in our government.
Don't you have a cruise in the works, Skipper?
We do have a veterans cruise that we are doing November 10th to the 17th. It's a Mexican cruise, and I'm still waiting on our flyer. But
Where's that starting?
Unfortunately, starting out of Los Angeles. But if you ever want to see what it feels like to leave Los Angeles, come on the cruise.
Were you holding a spot for me?
What I'm trying to get for you is I'm trying to get a corporate sponsor.
As the vice president, as the vice president of the Veteran Nation organization.
We are trying to find you a corporate sponsor. We're gonna make you like a NASCAR. We're gonna find a company to send you on this cruise, but you'll probably have to wear like a couple jackets or T-shirts and maybe do a couple like live spots like Ricky Bobby.
So, I want you to put Heather in my spot.
If I'll tell you what, I will be fighting, and I'm happy to get her a spot on the cruise.
Yeah, I want you to.
It would be awesome to get to talk to people and share more about all of our service members in this tragic
in my spot
situation.
You really want to trap Heather on a boat with me and my jokes for a week?
I don't know that I want to on a boat.
Oh no, because I know that if she spends a week with you on a boat,
I'm afraid of sharks.
I will be hosting this show alone afterwards. So bring it.
Heather, I do have to tell you, with last week's appearance, my best friend, who I've been friends with since kindergarten, he watched the show, and he goes, when you did your one pitch, and she said, "Do you stay awake at night thinking of these?" He wanted me to tell you, if you only knew.
I can only imagine.
Oh,
and
please,
Conspiracy Kitty is trying to get in here. He knows there's a government conspiracy.
Are you going to spare us this week of your?
Yeah, there are no pitches this week. Juan, do you have even
pitches?
Do you have even one video, or are we wrapping up? Daniel and Heather, thank you very much for coming on with us tonight. Skipper, make that happen for her. So if there's somebody out there that's going to do a sponsorship, I want it to go to Heather. She deserves it.
Absolutely.
And
thank you guys for having us.
And
Y'all are
Daniel
awesome.
and Heather, hopefully we can coordinate, and I'd like to bring you guys on Monday night's show over on my platform.
Yeah, everyone check out
Absolutely.
Minnesota
More
Black
audience.
Robe Regiment.
Skipper,
Justice
Looking
for our
forward to it.
Patriots.
that's right. Skipper, get us out of here.
Today's been a great show. Definitely want to thank Heather and Daniel, and always we're going to keep Caleb in our thoughts and prayers. And thank you for them for coming on to the show again, telling the story, and we're going to support them here on out. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for joining us, and as always, thank you for being worth serving.
Thanks, guys.